Welcome, everybody, to episode 4 of the Poker Fuse podcast. I am your host, Mike Gentile, here along with Nick Jones. Nick, how you doing today?
Yeah, hi, very, very good, very good. Just stepped off the plane from my week away, so just playing quick catch-up.
Anything jump out at you as something that you were maybe not expecting to see in the news?
Oh, no, you put me on the spot. I don't know. What are you hinting at there?
I'm just curious because it seemed like the news was pretty slow at the early part of the week, and then over the past couple of days, things have kind of heated up a bit.
Oh, it certainly picked up. I think so we have to first apologise here because we're recording this on a Saturday, so breaking a cardinal rule of being regular and consistent, we have broken in week 4, which is a real shame. We had planned to record this, but I was up a mountain with very bad internet signal and it didn't work, so we're coming at you a couple of days later. So when we had sketched out the plan for the podcast 2 days ago, there were 2 or 3 topics we definitely want to talk on. That is now, because we're 2 days delayed, blown up to half a dozen topics that I'm not sure if we're going to get to all of them.
You know, one thing with the delay in our release of episode 4 is, I guess we could say this is the first episode of season 2, the Saturday edition.
The Saturday edition, which is hopefully only going to be 1 episode long, and then we'll just
season 3 coming soon.
Yeah, we are going to consistently get back to doing these, recording them Thursday to release for your Friday morning commute or work day. So don't change your entire schedules just yet.
All right, well, let's crack on.
An announcement from PokerStars this week surprised everyone, certainly surprised us, that they were making some significant changes to their Stars rewards. I mean, that in and of itself is not surprising. We knew that they were talking about making some large changes in 2019. And they talked about some of the upcoming changes. A lot of these seem to make sense, and we'll touch on some of them. But the one that has come into effect now certainly surprised lots of people, which was a significant reduction in the rewards to MTT players.
Yeah, what they've done is they have changed the amount of reward points that are going to be awarded per dollar or euro of rake from 100 down to 45 for MTTs.
Yeah, so it's a 55% cut in rewards. Of course, everyone's rewards are different here in this personalised system. So, what that translates to in raw numbers is gonna differ. It only targets MTT players. So quite a surprising change, and obviously there's no positive way the PokerStars can spin this. This is just a very clear-cut, significant reduction to MTT players in the amount of ultimately rake back that they're going to get.
Yeah, and more specifically, and I'm not sure that being this specific matters in this instance, but I think it's worth noting that the way that they phrased it was for scheduled tournaments. Now, most scheduled tournaments are MTTs, but I wonder if they went that route because there are other types of tournaments that may fall under this reduction in rewards.
Yeah, it's possible. And so the reason why they've justified this, or as I understand it, is they see that the motivations for playing these MTTs is not really driven by the rewards program. It's driven by their big ticket, guarantees, their massive winter series and scoops and W coops. So players are ultimately, that's what's drawing them to the tables. And so the Stars rewards aren't as important to incentivize play. I think that's a fairly fair summary of their justification. Yeah,
they're looking, I think they said that they want to take the savings, if you will, from the rewards program, this change that they're making, and divert it into things such as their live product and toward their guarantees on the big series.
Yeah, it's just an odd decision from my perspective. I mean, I understand. I get from their business point of view why they would do this. I just can't imagine that this is a significant chunk of their expenditure. I mean, they've already what they pay out in Star rewards is a lot less than it was before. MTTs, I can't imagine, compared with sit and go and spin and go players and cash game players, is that significant that this is. And it's just, I mean, and announcing it with no other positive things. It seems like an odd thing, and obviously just coming off the back of such goodwill with the PSPC.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is we don't know the number. We don't know how much it's going to save them, so it's hard to really evaluate it. But yeah, as you point out, they had built up such goodwill with the PSPC, and it seems like a couple of weeks later, here they are announcing this reduction in rewards that has just really wiped out all that goodwill.
It's happening at a time when in the last week, 10 days, we have Party Poker announcing a 60% VIP program. We've got Run It Once Poker, which we talked a lot about last week, and we're going to touch on again this week with their new Splash of the Pot rewards program, which, everyone loves by the sounds of it, loves the idea of it, loves the innovation. So in that, media story, we have a very clear statement from PokerStars saying MTT players are going to get a lot less in what was a lot of players would say was significantly less than a couple of years ago anyway.
And beyond the rewards, I think it's a matter of image. So you have Party Poker, you have Run It Once promoting this player first image, and it seems like PokerStars is really falling behind in that regard. And I would imagine that if you ask them, that they would say that the people that they're trying to help with these changes are recreational players, and they don't see the poker world from the same perspective as the poker community. But for me, it just seems like there's this negativity that they really don't need to be portraying as a company.
And it seems like they would have known that this would have led to obviously a lot of negativity, and it seems I don't know. It seems like a minor cost saving, but maybe I don't understand the real equations here. But what we have seen, and this has happened within the last couple of hours of us recording this on Saturday afternoon, is a boycott has been organised for this for tomorrow for Sunday MTT, Mike.
Yeah, I think it's the Progressive Knockout Tournament, the 5200, that they are going to be boycotting, and looking through some of the things that they're requesting from PokerStars. Yeah.
When you say they, who is this?
This group of high stakes MTT players that are likely to be the most affected by the reduction in rewards. And they've put forth a wish list, if you will, of things that they'd like to see, including things that are increased communication. But one thing really jumped out at me from that list, and that is they are asking for increased transparency with regards to rewards. And that was something that PokerStars shifted away from when they implemented their new reward system and the chess as a mechanism to receive those rewards. They have completely obfuscated the amount that they are paying back to players. And I think if you are underperforming the expectations, then obfuscation is good. The way the expectations appear to be by the poker community, I don't think there's any way they're underperforming those expectations. So I see that lack of transparency as a hindrance and not a help.
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat ironic, perhaps, that, they've been very, very clear cut. They've been very open that they're making this change where they're reducing these MTT rewards by 55%, a very, very specific number. Where obviously they could just reduce the value of chess and no one would really know, right? And some of the other changes that they've announced, and again, all of these, I think they're things that we talked about on this podcast. We've definitely written about it in our articles and social media. Some changes that they are making, which make a lot of sense. They said that they are going to reduce the frequency of chests, but increase their value by a factor of 3, which is really, really sensible because opening these chests definitely seems like a chore for players. If you watch Twitch streams and that kind of thing, you get so many of them, you open them up and you get 50 cents or that kind of thing, or a ticket of very little value. So reducing this frequency, increasing their value obviously makes a lot of sense. There are a couple of other changes in there which make a lot of sense. But yeah, obviously the one thing that they're implementing now, the thing that really sticks out, is very specific and is obviously going to upset a lot of people. Okay, well, so we have this boycott. It's tomorrow. We've seen PokerStars have faced boycotts much broader than this. So this is just one tournament that MTT players are not going to play to show their dislike for some of the decisions PokerStars made. We have seen, I think it was back in 2015 when PokerStars first made the switch to their loyalty program. This was prior to this was way back before chess. It was when they switched to the stars coin system back in 2015, and there were really widespread sit-out protests at the cash game tables where players would take seats and sit out and try and stop cash games running. It ultimately did not have any effect. We did see it in France, like going back 2012, 2013. There were really big sit-out protests. I feel like that did have some. PokerStars did make some concessions, but it was a very well organised, disrupting event, and that was going back, 6 or 7 years. So we will see what happens tomorrow with that one tournament, but I'd be very surprised if PokerStars does not, forge ahead with their plans here.
In the Netherlands, we saw hearings this week on the legislation for regulating the online gambling market in that country. There is a vote that is scheduled to happen on the 19th. That's coming up next week. Nick, what can you tell us about what we're expecting to see out of the Netherlands?
Yeah, so this is looks like we might be finally coming to the end of 6-7 years of attempts to pass regulated online gaming in the Netherlands. It, for nothing other than, from what I can understand, really procedural and political stumbling blocks. Progress seems to be very, very slow, but there is broad, like, cross-party support for passing online gaming regulations. So there were hearings over the last 2 weeks discussing the finer points of these regulations, and it's going to be voted on Tuesday. It does seem like it is going to pass. We already have seen passage of these bills in the other houses in the Netherlands. So I believe this is the final stage that we will see a regulated online gambling market. So for online poker, it will mean that international sites that you play on today in the Netherlands will almost certainly obtain licenses and continue operating online poker, online casino, online sports betting.
So one of the big questions that I have is who's going to be allowed to operate once regulation comes into force. There was the regulator in the Netherlands had come out and said that they would allow operators to continue without penalizing them if they followed three major criteria. Those were that they did not promote their sites in the Dutch language, that they did not have a .nl domain, and that they did not advertise in the country. It seemed to me that it wasn't exactly clear that the legislation would allow those operators to operate from day one without a cooling off period.
Right. So it's been part of the extremely messy process of the last few years. So technically, from the Dutch perspective, right now, if you do not have an online gaming license, you are operating illegally in the country. You can't obtain one, and so everyone who accepts Dutch play is operating illegally. That's the Dutch position, and that's pretty clear cut. However, they have said both publicly and privately, the regulator said that they will focus enforcement proceedings. They will focus who the operators that they levy fines on for those that are particularly egregious in targeting Dutch customers. So as you just listed there, it's exactly that. If they have Dutch language websites, if they actively market in the country, if they work with affiliates to try and draw in Dutch customers, that would be a red light for them. But they've always been very clear that this is not saying if you do these things that you're legal and it's acceptable. This is just where we're going to be focusing our attention. So in the last 2 weeks, what we've seen is this topic of, if you're an illegal online gambling operator, you should basically face, as you say, a cooling off period is the term, but it's effectively a blackout period, things that we've seen in the United States. We saw it in Portugal, we've seen it, and it's been discussed every time Europeans discuss regulation. It doesn't happen too frequently, thankfully, because obviously it's terrible for consumers because if you have blackout periods, then all the legitimate operators today will be forced out of the market. They'll want licenses, they will adhere to this, and they will stay outside the market. And what's going to fill that hole other than less scrupulous operators who don't plan to be around the market that much longer? So it's not good for operators, it's not good for regulators, it's not good for the taxman. So generally speaking, they're terrible ideas. But so this topic came up with what is an illegal gambling operator, and it seems fairly clear that they are going to base it on, you know, whether you did infringe upon one of these priority criteria, which should mean that your PokerStars, 888, Party Poker, Kindred / Unibet have tried to toe this kind of fine line, and therefore should be fine. We've seen Kindred Group had their Q4 this week, and you know they were the analyst asked like 3 times in the Q&A, like, so did you actively target Dutch customers? And ultimately they said no, you know, we didn't. We couldn't stop Dutch customers from playing, but you know, we didn't target them directly. We don't have a .nl website. We've seen the Stars Group say the same things. So they seem fairly confident that they won't be impacted by this. But until, you know, and these priority criteria have changed over time. I think it was 6 months ago or a year ago that the regulator expanded this priority criteria to include you need to geo-block Dutch customers, which seemed very stringent and not something, as I understand it, that any operator actually did. But apparently this is also not a problem. So that's kind of where we stand today, which is nothing entirely clear, but everyone seems to be talking like it's going to be fine.
Yeah, that does seem to be the vibe, as people think that this cooling off period is only going to be for the most egregious violators. From my perspective, until they state specifically that people that followed the criteria set forth by the regulator are not going to be blacked out, I'm reserving judgment. I'm skeptical.
We've seen a flurry of activity and announcements from the Spanish market, both online and live, in the last couple of weeks. We wrote a really good feature on Pro this week. If you have access, read that, just about the investment from so many European operators into the Spanish market. We've also been covering the regulated market figures for 2018 from Spain, which have risen significantly.
Yeah, so we had the implementation of shared liquidity in the beginning of 2018 between Portugal, France, and Spain. And as the year-end numbers are rolling out, we're really starting to see the impact that shared liquidity has had. In Spain specifically, revenue has risen 37% year over year.
Yeah, and you know, along with that, we obviously had Ramon Colillas win the PokerStars Players No Limit Hold'em Championship in the Bahamas in January. Fantastic story there. If you don't know about his backstory, we have a really long feature on PokerFuse that we wrote in the Bahamas based on an interview we did with him. He has a really interesting story. He won his way to the PSPC through a Platinum Pass, which he won from winning a PokerStars sponsored tour in Spain. He cashed in 3 of 6 events. He also won an 888 sponsored tour in the same year, also cashing in 2 or 3 of 6 events. So these two things combined, Spain has been a huge focus for investment. So along with the shared liquidity, we're seeing operators enter the market for the first time. So Winamax launched in Spain in the last 6 months, sharing French and Spanish liquidity, and they have just announced for the first time they're going to run their first ever Spanish live event in 2019.
Yeah, there's been so much investment into Spain, and being that it is a core member of the European shared liquidity market, I can understand some of it. But I'm really curious as to why all of this is happening in Spain right now. From the perspective of the U.S., you hear about European countries, and from a financial perspective, Spain always seems to be in the news about having some financial troubles, economic troubles, and it would just seem like that would be more of a deterrent from companies investing in that market.
Yeah, so I think there are a few factors here. One is that Spanish gaming online poker figures are high, in particular because it's attracted new licenses. So for the first time, you know, Winamax is in there. Party Poker basically relaunched their site from complete dormancy. 888 is still ticking over there, but also that these sites opened up to international liquidity. So PokerStars now allows people outside of Spain to register on PokerStars Spain. So and Winamax also allows international signups on their Spanish license now. So this has triggered the particularly high growth figures that we're seeing in Spain much higher than we're seeing in France, although France is also on the up year over year. But also from the live event, I can only guess here that just Spain is a particularly good location from a regulatory perspective to run live events. Barcelona has become a real hub for well, it's always been massive on the European Poker Tour. We're seeing Party Poker there. 888 is going to be back there this summer with their Barcelona event, which they ran with great success in 2018. And so we've seen PokerStars are going to Madrid this year as well for the EPT Open. Winamax's Sismix event, I think, is Madrid or Barcelona. So I can only see. I mean, they're great countries. I think they're great cities. I think they're fairly cheap. They're easy to fly to. They're in the centre of Europe. Presumably more flexible than France or Italy in terms of running these live events there. So I think it's a combination of factors that makes it so attractive.
Yeah, it has to be. So beyond economics, it definitely makes sense that it could be a softer, lighter touch regulatory regime or environment in the country. And it could be just cultural as well. It could be that Spanish people enjoy poker more than people in other countries.
Yeah, and I think, and certainly from the live event scene, I mean, the number of tours, these small local tours that are going to be in Spain this year. So PokerStars is sponsoring I'm going to forget all my names here, the CEP. 888 is back sponsoring the CNP. So those are the two that Ramon won last year. Party Poker just announced that they are sponsoring another tour, which the name escapes me. I wouldn't be surprised if Winamax looks to run a local tour here. They haven't announced it. They've only announced their Sismix kind of one-off event. And we're also seeing the Latin American Aconcagua Poker. I understand that they have announced or are about to announce at least one stop in Spain this year. So it's just a huge expansion. These small tours, they stop in some small cities around the country from all parts. It's really exciting. I wouldn't be surprised at all if PokerStars runs another PSPC that it would be in Barcelona or potentially Madrid because it seems just such a focal point. So, Mike, bring me up to speed on everything that's happening in the United States in the last week.
Yeah, so everything is revolving around the DOJ's opinion of the Wire Act. And if you don't know the backstory on that, you can go back and listen to previous episodes or do a little digging around on PokerFuse. I'm sure you'll find it on the homepage rather easily. What we saw this week were two significant events. We saw the state of New Hampshire file a lawsuit for an injunction to stop the enforcement of the DOJ's latest opinion, which, by the way, includes all online gambling being illegal if it crosses state lines. The implications of which, obviously for poker, would mean that shared liquidity or interstate player pools, such as the one that currently exists between New Jersey, Delaware, and Nevada, would then be deemed illegal. And the DOJ has come out and given a 90-day period for operators to get their houses in order before they start proceeding with enforcement.
Does the New Hampshire lawsuit, does it pertain just to lotteries, or would this have wider ramifications?
So it does have wider ramifications. They are challenging the legitimacy of the opinion to begin with. The other interesting thing that happened this week is the Department of Justice really has a new boss. The Attorney General for the United States, the Senate has confirmed William Barr as their new Attorney General. So basically, there's a new boss in town, and what's going to happen there's a lot of speculation. I can give you my personal opinion, and that is what we've seen from the Trump administration is we've seen that they are putting all their eggs in the Supreme Court basket, if you will. So they've been disregarding any kind of feedback that they may be rebuked on a federal level. We saw that with the travel ban that came early on in the administration. That was escalated all the way up to the Supreme Court. We're seeing that with the national emergency that was just declared. They've already conceded that they will probably lose in the federal court level, and they're looking to the Supreme Court level, where, by the way, Trump has nominated and had two of his nominees put onto the Supreme Court since his term began. So I think that is going to be the mode of operation for this administration, and I got to think that that's what they're looking to when it comes to this DOJ opinion as well.
And so this new boss in town, how can that impact this DOJ opinion? What are the implications?
Well, everyone could look at his history and see what types of, where he's come down on several issues. And while he is known for being fairly protective of states' rights, which bodes well for the online gaming industry, there's no indication that he is going to step in and go against his boss, who is the president, and just reverse this opinion, because it doesn't seem very likely to me that this opinion came out without the approval of the top guy, who's Donald Trump.
Ending on a slightly lighter note, we are now well over 1 week into Run It Once Poker, having launched for real money. Overall, we'd say it seems to be like a big success in terms of the buzz that it's generated, the excitement we've seen on social media. The site has seemingly performed admirably. There are bugs there, but there haven't been any huge crashes. So far, things look all good. Yeah,
it's progressing nicely. I think they're building a solid reputation in the community. Their promotions have gained a lot of attention. The Splash the Pot, as we touched on in previous episodes, they seem to be doing a lot of things right.
So we're getting the first cash game numbers for Run It Once, which is tracked by Game Intel, the company formerly called Poker Scout, that tracks independently cash game traffic across all the world's largest networks, and obviously that data is available on Poker Industry Pro if you have access. So we have the figures from day one since they launched. They're currently averaging around 100 concurrent cash game seats average daily.
And how does that relate to other markets? Is that good, bad?
Yeah, so it's what their expectations were, I don't know. I mean, 100 players is generally that, being that they have quite a small player pool, that's going to be cash games running across their major stakes all times of day. Compared with other people, it's approximately the size of, I'm just looking down the table here, so it's approximately the size of 888 Poker's network in Spain. It's smaller than Sky Poker. It's looking at it
compared to somebody like Unibet or MPN.
Yeah, so Unibet and MPN are more around the 500 mark, and so until we, and it's been about flat around that 100 mark for the last 4 or 5 days. So a huge result, a huge success with them, being more 300, 400 seats. But it's presumably a solid enough start. It's a fairly close point of comparison is WSOP, their network in the United States across 3 states. So that averages something let's just have a look at that, about 200. So it's half the size of that. Also, they don't have tournaments, so that works in their favour. So they're definitely going to want to see that number, move up. But it's a start.
Yeah, it's definitely on the smaller side of most of the other online poker rooms that we're seeing. But I think the potential for them to grow is, at this point, as a newcomer, probably greater than most of the competition.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the real work begins. I mean, the launch was successful. They've seen a lot of discussions on social media, listening to other podcasts. It's been almost universally kind of welcomed. In terms of, I can't think of another site launch that's been this successful in the sense of generating this amount of buzz, introducing exciting new features that have got people talking. I mean, Splash the Pot was absolutely key, I think, for that. Without that, I think it's because it's a fairly basic site. They took it really down to basics. They've only launched cash games. It's got bugs and it doesn't have resizable tables. So there's lots of things that they need to do. And I think one problem they face now is the next updates they do, they're going to struggle to generate buzz, because who's going to get excited that they now have resizable tables? They now have basic features that other operators have. So until they get to the point that they're going to launch tournaments, that could be exciting. They're going to have some kind of grind now where they need to still fix bugs. They need to introduce the features that everyone needs. And now they're over the initial excitement. They now need to market this product and bring in new customers. And that's no easy task. And I don't expect that they think it is. I'm sure they have another plan. Everything they've done so far is very smooth, but certainly the hard work begins now.
Yeah, from an industry perspective, it'll be very interesting to see how they look to grow their player base, because that's really what they need to do at this point. If you're half the size of WSOP.com or the All-American Poker Network in the U.S., there's definitely opportunity to grow there. We've always known that they would, or always suspected that they would fare well within the poker community itself. I will personally be interested to see how they go out and they court recreational players. How do they try and reach the more, or the less hardcore poker person to be a player on their site? Well, that's a wrap for episode 4. Thanks everyone for listening, and as always, feedback is welcome. One specific point of feedback that I'd like to get from the audience, Nick, is I'm interested if they'd like us to do interviews.
Yeah, certainly it was something that a couple of people mentioned on Twitter. Something that we could absolutely do if you feel that. I mean, we'd like to do something a bit different to others, but we can certainly do that. Maybe special edition ones, maybe a different point in the week. We could certainly set them up. So do let us know if that's something you want to hear.
And until next week, thanks a lot, everyone, and we'll see you soon.